thousands of chemicals released into our environment are bound to have some kind of effect prenatally and postnatally in our children. Most of them have an impact on driving up inflammation and reducing the ability of the body to detox. And as we will find out as we move more deeply into some of these disorders, those are two of the keynotes that we often see in all kinds of mental and physical issues. Excessive levels of inflammation gone wild, so to speak, and a change in the body's ability to detox toxic compounds. That could be because of damage to the detoxification process itself, or an exposure to so many compounds that need to be detoxified that the body cannot keep up, or a combination of the same. But I still think it's extremely problematic that from 1995 to 1999, there was a 580% increase in the use of antidepressants for children under 6. Now, one of the best botanical interventions that I have seen for anxiety is a clinically studied extract of echinacea. This slide's actually incorrect because it's not echinacea. It turns out there's a specific echinacide in echinacea that attaches to certain brain receptors and elicits a feeling of calm. The reason I like to use this specific kind of product for anxiety is because it is non-drowsy and it doesn't interfere with cognitive skills or thinking. So as you know, there's many things that will alleviate anxiety. Jack Daniels and vodka will relieve anxiety. Unfortunately, that's how a lot of people get started down the wrong path. So alcohol will calm people down and relieve anxiety. There's a lot of prescription drugs. Valium, Librium are some of the older class of drugs that will reduce anxiety. Some of the newer ones are Buspirone and Xanax will absolutely reduce anxiety and increase your feelings of calm and well-being, but they all come with a downside. That's especially problematic for children and teens because they all have abuse potential, they all have addiction potential, and they all change thinking and levels of energy, and they interfere with proper sleep. Proper sleep is absolutely mandatory for kids as they are maturing because the vast majority of growth and bodily repair takes place in stage 4 sleep. That's also when the majority of the body's human growth hormone is released into the body. So if you have drugs that are keeping kids, in lighter levels of sleep without getting into stage 4, you can see all kinds of changes in, number 1, their overall growth, number 2, their brain development, and number 3, their ability to recover from illnesses and heal wounds, and number 4, their ability to focus in school and perform academically. When we use this specific echinacide that's been studied, it was developed at the Academy of Sciences in Budapest, Hungary. We find that it attaches to certain receptors in the brain, and they're called cannabinoid receptors that trigger calmness without affecting consciousness. And this is a big deal because when you're not sedated and you don't have to worry about addictions and you don't have withdrawal with a sudden, if you for some reason would choose to stop using this product suddenly, but yet you can increase the ability to pay attention and you can elicit a feeling of calm and reduce anxiety. It's just a godsend. It's something that's very, very mild but very, very useful for kids and young teens that are experiencing varying types of anxiety. Now the clinical work with this specific echinacide has involved 21 days of use. They looked at individuals over the course of 7 days of treatment and then the subsequent 21 days and found dramatic reductions in overall levels of anxiety with a very small dose. In this study, they used 20 milligrams of this specific echinacide twice a day. Newer studies have shown that a more effective dose, especially for larger people, might be 2 20-milligram tablets twice a day. And some practitioners have even gone up to 2 tablets 3 times a day. But in any event, overall, we see significant reduction in anxiety by day 3. So this is very rapid acting. And when compared to the results of benzodiazepine drugs, drugs, like drugs in the Librium and Valium class. It was found to be as effective as these drugs without the abuse potential and the sedation. If you're groggy and sedated, let me tell you, it's very hard to read Les Miserables by Victor Hugo and understand why Jean Valjean is stealing the loaf of bread. So when you're dealing with higher levels of literature and higher levels of mathematics, these kids need every single brain cell focused and firing and ready to learn. Another thing we have to focus on is, remember when I said that we see as a root cause of many mental disorders and physical disorders unchecked inflammation, and not all inflammation results in pain. This might be surprising to some of our listeners, and it would probably be surprising to some medical doctors as well, that individuals can have high levels of inflammation but not necessarily experience it as pain, because people are used to thinking of inflammation as osteoarthritis or rheumatoid arthritis or tendonitis, things that are going to cause pain in our joints and tendons. But people who have problems with anxiety and depression have been shown to have higher levels of inflammation in the brain than individuals who are not suffering from these problems. They also have higher levels of oxidative stress in the brain, because inflammation creates free radicals, and free radicals create higher and higher levels of oxidative stress. The two best natural anti-inflammatories I've seen for working with brain are curcumin and omega-3 fatty acids from fish, the DHA and the EPA. I know there's more than one kind of omega-3 fatty acid, but the two that are from fish, DHA and EPA, are the most like what's in the human body and the most useful when you're trying to deal with anxiety and depression. In one study of looking specifically at curcumin as an effective antidepressant, and this was a study of BCM95 curcumin that's blended with turmeric essential oil, so it's enhanced absorption. 60 patients with depression received either this specific kind of curcumin or the prescription drug fluoxetine. And that fluoxetine is the generic name of the prescription drug Prozac. 75% of the curcumin group and 70% of the fluoxetine group were reported as good or excellent results. So in actuality, the curcumin performed a little bit better than did the prescription drug. However, the group that performed the highest was, and it was just a little bit, was the combination of the two. So it was about 76%, so just almost on par with the curcumin group. So while it may not be necessary to use both, it is also safe if you have individuals that are already using prescription antidepressant drugs, it's also safe to recommend adding curcumin to the regimen. And this might be a good place for me to step back and share that I don't believe in stopping any prescription drug without including the doctor who prescribed it in the loop, and also I don't believe in stopping any anxiety or depression drug without proper oversight, because sudden and abrupt stoppage of these medications can have severe consequences, which is part of the reasons I don't like to start them in the first place unless absolutely, absolutely necessary. For example, did you know if you suddenly and abruptly stop taking Xanax, you can start having epileptic seizures? Did you know that if you suddenly stop taking the SSRI class, the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor class of antidepressant medications? Let's just say you'd been on it for 2 years and you stop tomorrow, but you can get a rebound depression that is so profound that it dramatically increases your risk of suicide. So absolutely, if you're working with your customers or people in your family, please, if you do decide to work towards taking a drug holiday, taking a vacation from the drugs to see how well the person can be maintained with more natural interventions, please include the practitioner and please make sure that they are weaned off very slowly. In another study of 56 patients with major depressive disorder, they received BCM95 curcumin twice daily for 8 weeks, and they had significant reductions in symptoms of both anxiety and depression, and it was especially effective, and this is very promising to me. There's a type of depression called atypical depression. It's difficult to treat because it doesn't respond well to the Prozacs and the Zolofts of the world, those SSRI antidepressant medications. But guess what? Responded beautifully to this BCM95 curcumin in this study. So when we look at helping individuals with depressive disorder, I believe that probably the most important thing to start with is alleviating the high levels of inflammation and oxidative stress in the brain, making sure that whatever we choose and select to use can cross the blood-brain barrier, and making sure that it's clinically studied for efficacy. Now, omega-3s are also very important in brain function. In a study on children ages 6 through 12, one group got the EPA DHA from fish, the other group received placebo. The study lasted 16 weeks, and they used, these are all clinically validated scales, the Children's Depression Rating Scale, et cetera, et cetera. Highly significant effects of omega-3s on symptoms. So great ability to reduce the impact of both depression and anxiety on children ages 6 through 12 using very standardized omega-3 fatty acids. I really like to focus on adding phospholipids and peptides as well because they boost omega-3 activity. Phospholipids help transport DHA and EPA into the cells. The phospholipids themselves, especially things like phosphatidylserine, have memory-enhancing properties, and phospholipids on their own have been shown to reduce anxiety. There's also certain omega-3 extracts. They're not oils, but salmon extracts that include the peptides. Nobody includes the peptides, but I think peptides are amazingly important. The ones on the market today, you'll see peptides that come from fish. There's also some milk peptides that are on the market for blood pressure. The ones found in fish have amazing anxiety-relieving properties. In fact, in France, there's a prescription drug that just uses peptides from fish as an anti-anxiety medication. They work very well. They work very quickly within about 2 to 3 weeks. So look for omega-3 products that have phospholipids and these bioactive peptides. It's like getting 3 products in one when you're trying to deal with children who are suffering from these issues. Just as an aside, I think this is especially useful for OCD, using the salmon extracts in OCD, because we have seen some amazing results in young people who have various forms of OCD responding particularly well to a dramatic increase in phospholipids, peptides, and omega-3s in the brain. So let's talk for a moment about focus and concentration. Our current children have been called the Ritalin generation. 11% of children and 1 in 5 high school-age boys have been diagnosed with ADD or ADHD. Come on, 1 in 5? That's kind of a large number. And 60% of the kids diagnosed with ADD, ADHD receive a stimulant like Ritalin or some of Ritalin's cousins. But Ritalin has some significant adverse effect. If you take Ritalin for 3 years, kids tend to be about 1 inch shorter and 5 pounds lighter. Again, it interferes with sleep. And one of the most important things for proper physiological and neurological development and resistant to disease in childhood is proper sleep. That's why sleep schedules are so important, and sleep hygiene. And, you know, when you've got your kids that are begging you to stay up past 9 o'clock on a school night because they want to watch some show for another 2 hours. That's why it's important to have some level of discipline and say, no, you really need your rest. It's not just about being alert and awake and ready to go the next day. There's actual physiological consequences of not getting adequate sleep. And Ritalin, really being a stimulant, interferes with proper sleep. Kids report appetite loss, stomach aches, headaches. The long-term effects on developing children are unknown. So I am not completely anti-drug. I imagine there's some of you in the audience that are. I have seen on occasion children that have such significant impairments for whatever reason that sometimes pharmaceutical interventions might be necessary. But I truly believe in my heart of hearts and in everything that I've seen that more than 90% of the children that are using these medications could get by on none whatsoever with some lifestyle changes or on a much, much lower dose if they only had healthier interventions for proper functionality. Now, ADHD, which is what we talk about, attention deficit disorder, when we talk about that, most people think of it as an individual syndrome, but in truth, more current thinking is that there's a whole spectrum of disorders called the autism spectrum. And at the farthest end, we have autism itself, autism in all its various forms that is on the dramatic increase in our society. Milder than autism, a related disorder is Asperger's and progressive disorders of development not otherwise specified. Anxiety and depression in childhood, pathological anxiety and depression are often associated with ADD, ADHD, autism, Asperger's, and other disorders, and so does OCD. So when we look at this spectrum of disorders where there are variants of some of the same dysfunctional biological processes that are happening in the body, one of the joint issues we see, and one of the basic problems we see, is unchecked inflammation. So if we can get inflammation under control and reduce inflammatory triggers in these children, then we're going to see an improvement not just in mental health but physical health as well. So looking specifically at autism, because that's the most dramatic of these disorders on the spectrum, studies have shown that kids have impaired detoxification when they have autism. And I included a study on here. I don't always include where I get my information on slides, but there's so much debate out there of people who are saying, oh, you know, autism and Asperger's has nothing to do with detoxification. This was published just last year by prestigious researchers and archived in the electronic database of the National Institutes of Health, Institutes of Medicine. Very legitimate, very mainstream researchers who are saying absolutely the detox mechanisms are associated with the severity of the symptoms on the autism spectrum. Now, this is just one example. There's more than one. But, for example, we all know that mercury is a neurotoxin. It takes 2 molecules of glutathione to get rid of 1 molecule of mercury. Kids on the spectrum do not have as much glutathione, and the glutathione they have is not able to stay in its active form for very long. And living close to landfills has often also been associated with elevated rates of kids on the spectrum because of the excessive exposure to toxins that depletes glutathione from the body that leaves them vulnerable to neurological damaging compounds that their body can't handle as well as kids who are not on the spectrum. In one study looking specifically at glutathione, children without this neurological difference had 99% of their glutathione in the active form and only 1% in the inactive form, versus children with autism, 60% in the active form, 40% in the inactive form. I don't know why this isn't the headline of every behavioral journal out there. I think that by helping kids be more replete in glutathione and improving their detoxification can work wonders on helping them with both physical and mental issues associated with their problems. There's a variety of ways to get glutathione into the body, and this by far is the most important, intravenous glutathione. A lot of the really important work done on raising glutathione levels in the body have been done using intravenous. The problem with intravenous or IV means that you have to go to a provider. It's usually not covered by insurance because it's experimental. Even though they've seen improvements in kids that get IV glutathione, you know, some parents live hundreds and hundreds of miles from clinics that even offer it. So the next best is probably using, you know, after that, they used N-acetylcysteine. So they used this precursor compound, you may know it as NAC, to try to boost glutathione levels. But guess what? That's a problem. Why? Because these kids don't have very good machines. You have a machine in your body that makes glutathione. If it's not working very well, as is in the case of kids on the spectrum, you can throw raw materials in until the cows come home, and you're not going to see very much improvement in functionality. So next, scientists tried to work with oral glutathione, and they found that it was destroyed by the digestive process. It turned from the active form to the inactive form. So we had study after study where oral glutathione couldn't perform because even when it was enteric-coated, it couldn't get into the bloodstream in its active form, which brought everybody back to, well, we guess the only way you can do this is to use IV glutathione. Until 2 years ago, researchers in France at University of Nancy, I do believe, developed a unique sublingual administration of glutathione, where the glutathione is stabilized with compounds from pomegranate called punicalagins so that it melts slowly under the tongue, bypasses the GI tract entirely so it cannot be destroyed. Doesn't have to be given intravenously. Very simple administration. Slow melt tablets that last about 20 minutes so that the mouth is not overwhelmed with the ability for the mucosa to absorb the glutathione. This has just been a godsend because for the first time we don't have to worry about intravenous. We don't have to worry about oral types that get destroyed, we're finally able to give a reasonable amount of glutathione to these kids by giving it with a sublingual application. Also, it's important to consider the omega fatty acids, and I know I've already spoken about them earlier with regards to anxiety disorders and depression, especially OCD. But when we look at children's blood levels of DHA, it can be a significant predictor of their ability to concentrate. So it's reasonable to believe that more DHA equals better levels of concentration. Less DHA equals more difficulty with concentration. A very recent study published in Neuropsychopharmacology not even a year ago said that children's blood levels who had the low DHA, when they were treated with EPA and DHA, it reduced their symptoms of ADHD. That's really important. Something as simple as introducing cold water fish into the diet 3 times a week and taking supplements that are rich in EPA and DHA in their active form can make just a whole world of difference in these children. B vitamins in their active human form are also essential for healthy nervous system function. And when I say the active form, B vitamins, the way B vitamins occur in food and most vitamins is in the inactive form, and then your body has to take them and do a little magic, presto changeo, turn them into the human form, and they're ready to go, go, go. Support the healthy nervous system and the function of the neurotransmitters in the brain, which help with cognitive thinking and the ability to process and problem solve. Important stuff for school, right? But in kids that are on the spectrum, whether it's anxiety disorders, depression, wherever they are, where they have some of these physiological issues, guess what? They also tend to not be very good at converting the B vitamins from their inactive form to the active form. So doing something as small as changing them from their kids' chewy vitamins with lots of sugar in them or artificial sweeteners to a capsular form that has the already converted, like these bioactive forms of the B vitamins, can be crucially important, not just for their functionality presently, but also for their growth and development down the road. All right, we've talked a lot about mind. Let's switch gears to body, because when we talk about back to school, we also think about back to colds and flus, back to bronchitis, back to pneumonia. The average child has anywhere between 6 and 10 colds a year. And why is that? Well, it's not just because of being out in the cold, although there are certain things that happen in the wintertime that make us a little bit more prone to infections, but kids have an immature immune system. They haven't developed the resistance to a lot of pathogens in the environment as adults have done. They also have really close contact with other children, and they don't practice very good sanitation practices. There's lots of sloppy kisses and sharing of cookies and lots of forgetting to wash hands after we blow the nose. And if you've ever been around kids, you'll see that there's just an awful lot of, let's put it in a positive spin, an awful lot of opportunities to challenge that immune system and make it stronger. Also stress. Kids that are under stress, or adults as well, higher levels of stress equal higher levels of cortisol equal lower levels of innate immunity. There's also a real problem that I won't spend a lot of time on, but there's a ridiculous overuse of antibiotics, and because of our overuse of antibiotics, we have taught germs how to become stronger, and recently they found a new strain of strep that was responsible for virtually all the ear infections out there, plus pneumonia, that was resistant to all 18 antibiotics that have been approved for use by the FDA in children. Now, there's still a few antibiotics it responds to, but they haven't been approved for use in children, and so their use is experimental. Sometimes pediatricians prescribe antibiotics because the parents expect them to, or because they are afraid of litigation if they don't prescribe an antibiotic and the child goes on to develop some kind of after effect, rare after effect from the disease. This is a place where natural medicine can make a huge difference. And a really interesting, and I know you know lots of them. I know you know how wonderful elderberry is. And I know you know how wonderful, higher levels of vitamin C and getting good amounts of vitamin D every day into children. And most of you, if you're interested in natural medicine, you already know some of these things. But here's some things you may not know. There's a compound that's sort of made by bees and sort of not, called propolis. The Greeks called it propolis because it means defender of the city. This natural material is collected by bees from the local area, quite often trees, and then they're carried in special receptacles in the bee's body back to the hive. And so propolis is sort of a synergy between being collected by the bees, transported by the bees, mixed with a little bit of compounds from the bees into a material that is amazingly antibacterial, antiviral, and antifungal. So the bees have used this to defend their hives since bees have been around. And the humans, for thousands of years, have learned that propolis is pretty darn good at killing the bugs that affect human health as well. There's evidence from ancient manuscripts that ancient Greeks used propolis to treat wounds and abscesses, which are staph infections of the skin. Bees also use propolis to protect their hive from invaders. Let's say a very large invader, let's say a little mouse scurries into the hive trying to steal some honey. The bees will kill the mouse, but then they can't transport the mouse, so how did they prevent the whole hive from being contaminated with putrefaction? They covered the little mouse with propolis, and nary a bacteria escaped. So modern uses for propolis are, some people use it as a general everyday immune tonic, and I like this because it has very direct antibacterial effects, antiviral effects, etc. But it isn't necessarily a, quote, immune booster. It's not going to call out the troops. So I don't like to use immune boosters on an everyday basis because I think it tires out the immune system. Quit ask. The immune, it's like crying wolf. Stop calling for extra white blood cells every single day. Pretty soon I'm going to stop listening to you. Propolis doesn't do that. So it's great for cold and flu treatment. It's great for viral infections. It's very safe for children. You can also use it on candida and fungal infections. There's topical propolis that has been clinically studied to reduce canker sores and fever blisters and reduce the activity of herpes simplex. Fantastic for bacterial infections, including MRSA, methicillin-resistant Staph aureus. It may have developed resistance to antibiotics. There is no bacteria yet that they have found has developed a resistance to propolis. In one study, there was a European propolis extract called GH2002. And the reason that this is a little bit different is because propolis is always mixed with beeswax by the bees. So in its crude state, there's a lot of beeswax. Well, there's some problems with beeswax. Number one, a lot of people are allergic to beeswax, which I didn't know, but it turns out that it's a relatively high allergenicity. But number two, the wax kind of interferes with the activity of the propolis. I mean, if you take a crude extract of propolis, 2/3 of what you're taking is wax and it's not doing anything for you. So this 2002 from Europe called GH2002 is purified. So they take out all of the beeswax and other impurities, so what you're left with is just a pure, powerful concentrated propolis. So 50 individuals with a common cold. One group was treated with propolis. One group was treated with placebo, which means an imitation pill that was not active. This was really amazing. Usually, on average, it takes 5 days to start to recover from a cold. In this group, 5 of the patients of these 20 had recovery in 1 day. So instead of 5 days, remember, average is 5 days, they had recovery in 1 day. 16 patients had it in 2 days. So 21 of the 25 patients reduced their cold duration and severity by much more than 50%. They more than cut it in half because by 2 days of use, 21 of the 25 were recovered. The 3 other patients were a little slower, took them 3 days, and 1 person dropped out of the study. So 2.5 times shorter duration until you reach recovery. Let's switch gears a little bit for healthy body, healthy skin, and talk about acne, which plays such a huge role in children's self-esteem and is the most common skin condition in the United States. We see a flare-up of acne around puberty because of changing hormones. We see more acne in teenagers and boys than in girls. And diet and stress plays a role in acne as well. And it's not because of dirty skin or because the children aren't washing enough. They've found that it's an inflammatory process. It all comes down to inflammation, doesn't it? But also, high cortisol levels trigger acne. One study found that students had more severe acne during exam time than at any other time of the school year. There are nutrients to prevent and reduce acne outbreaks. One of my favorites is sulfur. Now, sulfur is not the same as sulfa. I'm asked this question all the time. Sulfur is a natural mineral that has antibacterial activity, and it's a particularly good antibacterial when it comes to the type of bacteria that causes acne. You can use it topically, and you can use it systemically. However, it's not the same as sulfa, which is a class of antibiotic drugs. Sulfa does not contain sulfur. So if you've got friends who say, I can't take sulfur because I'm allergic to sulfur, the chances are that they're allergic to sulfa drugs, and it has nothing to do with sulfur, which is one of the best compounds I've ever seen for helping to reduce and prevent acne. Potassium is also really important. It keeps the bacteria and fungi in the intestines. It keeps them in check. And the balance of healthy gut bacteria is closely associated with the balance of bacteria on the skin as well. Highly concentrated vitamin A is retinol acetate, helps to stop the buildup of dead skin cells, which clogs the pores and creates the acne pustule in the first place. Beta-carotene won't work. Beta-carotene is a precursor to vitamin A. You have to have the retinol forms because those are the most concentrated. And zinc. If you have the people who have the lowest zinc levels tend to be the people that's associated with an increase in acne flare-ups. So just by restoring proper nutrient balance to the body, we can have some dramatic activity in acne. I get a little frustrated sometimes. There's so much money to be made off of acne care. And you've all seen the commercials on TV, haven't you, of all of the different systems with the celebrities come out. Well, I think the systems are great, wonderful, and hopefully they're gentle and they're not stripping the skin of all their, natural protective oils. But if you don't address what's going on inside, you're never going to get on top of the acne situation by using an external product alone. Last but certainly not least, we're going to talk for a moment about energy because we're seeing a big resurgence in iron deficiency. It's one of the most actually I would say it is the most common nutrient deficiency in children. It's the most common mineral deficiency in children. It affects more than 2 million children in the United States. And low iron levels are associated with behavioral and cognitive difficulties. In one study, they found that iron deficiency in girls is linked with reductions in mathematical ability. And girls after puberty are especially at risk for anemia and low iron levels because of the onset of the menstrual cycles and the loss of blood and iron every single month. Iron deficiency is really prevalent in toddlers. Up to 15% of kids ages 1 to 3 are low in iron because there's no iron in cow's milk, and the casein in milk actually interferes with the absorption of iron that you get from other foods. You lose about 40 milligrams of iron every menstrual cycle, and the higher your rates of exercise and physical activity, the more iron you use up. So your high-level athletes run big risk for iron deficiency as well. It's hard to raise iron levels, especially if you are trying to do it with the foods that you eat, because some of the foods that are richest in iron are foods that which are not appealing to children, like eat your spinach and eat your calf's liver, not something that every 3-year-old is eager to hear at the dinner table. So how do we get more iron into the body? Well, especially when iron's hard to absorb and it can cause constipation. In one study, 30% of consumers stopped taking ferrous sulfate because it created a bad taste in their mouth. But then they took it in the form of ferrous bisglycinate, which is another kind of iron that's attached to something that's more soothing to the body, more easily absorbed, and they had no reports of adverse taste in the mouth whatsoever. So when you're looking at raising iron levels, if you do need to use an iron supplement, it's very important that you look at chelated iron because it is so much easier to absorb and has so greatly reduced adverse effects in the body. Another issue with iron is it turns the stool black. The unabsorbed iron turns the stool black and causes constipation. Well, if it's absorbed properly, you're not going to see as much issue with blackened stool, and you're not going to see the issues with constipation. The dosage for people who are not severely anemic but need to raise their iron levels is about 30 milligrams of the ferrous bisglycinate daily. Taking it along with magnesium, zinc, and copper works really great. Those are the great supportive players that help iron with its role. If you have children that are tired all the time or athletes that are coming home just washed out and exhausted, this also greatly increases endurance and stamina. So we've covered a lot of different nutrient interventions that can help kids promote healthier mind and healthier body. So quick recap, for anxiety and depression, we looked at a specific echinocide from echinacea developed in Hungary that has been shown to alleviate anxiety without interfering with focus and concentration. Special forms of curcumin blended with turmeric essential oils to dramatically reduce inflammation and restore proper brain functioning, and omega-3s with phospholipids and salmon peptides that play a role in proper brain function that are especially useful in issues with anxiety and OCD. For focus and concentration, especially for kids on the spectrum, we saw how important it is to help them be more replete with glutathione, and how the discovery of being able to provide glutathione in its active form via a sublingual format is a huge leap forward in providing this essential nutrient for proper neural function and liver detox for these kids, along with omega-3s and phospholipids. And we talked about B vitamins in their active form, not their inactive form, being absolutely crucial. So healthy mind, healthy body. The healthy body part, we talked about immune system. We talked about unique compounds that bees collect and mix in their bodies called propolis. For acne, we talked about sulfur, both topically and systemically, swallowing it, and systemic potassium, vitamin A in the retinol acetate form, and zinc. And for energy, we talked a lot about why iron is so important, especially if you have a super athlete. And before we go to questions, I wanted to share the snapshot of you with you of our own kids. A lot of us here in the office have had children returning to school today. This is my son, who's starting his sophomore year of high school. He's my youngest. Our medical librarian son is this little girl here, and we also see the picture of the 3 children. That's from one of the people that works in our QA department of all her 3 children that are returning to school. So for some reason, I've had my slides disappear. So I'm going to turn this over to Alexi, our webinar expert. And Lex, if you could open up the lines for some questions, please.
All right, so thank you everyone, and hope you enjoyed the presentation. If you have any questions from today's presentation, if you wouldn't mind just putting those in the Q&A box. So if you remember from back on the slide here, we had that Q&A box at the top right-hand portion of your screen. So feel free to type away and send us any questions that you may have. Cheryl, do you have any questions in your Q&A box?
I have no Q&A box there, Lexi. I had a technical issue where my slides disappeared. WebEx abruptly severed my connection. I hope that didn't happen to any of you, but as long as I can hear, I can still answer questions, and I'm glad. What perfect timing, right? Right at the very last slide, it severed the connection.
I do have a question here in the chat box, and it says, any...
Pardon me? Can you hear me, Lexi, because you're not coming through?
I heard you briefly.
All right. Well, I don't know if our participants can hear me, but there aren't really any food sources technically of glutathione, because imagine if there were glutathione in the food, then the digestive process would turn that glutathione from its active form to its inactive form. There are foods, however, that do promote. All righty.
All right, Cheryl is going to jump on my headset here to answer the question that we had about the food sources of glutathione.
So food sources of glutathione would probably not work, because as you swallow it, and expose it to the digestive process, you're going to have a destruction of the glutathione anyway. That said, there are foods, especially sulfur-containing foods, that are particularly useful for boosting glutathione production in the body, especially in healthy individuals. And so one of them comes to the top of my head is garlic. So one of the healthy functions of garlic is to help promote glutathione production. But if you already have a problem or a disorder of some kind where you need more predictable levels of glutathione in the body, that's when I like the sublingual form. What do you think of juices for kids? Well, I think it should be an occasional treat. I think that we don't have to have sweet flavorings to everything we drink, and if children grow up drinking lots and lots and lots of sweet juices, they're going to be drawn to sweet things, and that can be a difficult habit to break, and God knows we have way too much sugar in our diet. So even healthy, or what we consider healthy juices, like, even a naked juice, which is my own son every now and then will have a naked juice. They have some good stuff in it, but it's still an awful lot of carbs and awful lot of sweetness. So I think if we get our children to drink beverages that are not necessarily having that level of sugar, it's probably a great practice. But I think that juices are different from juicing, because in juicing you're taking the whole plant and just turning it into a thickened liquid form. So you're getting the plant fibers and you're getting more nutrients. So I like juicing a little bit better than just giving kids a lot of juices. I got another question here. Good to hear about help for OCD. I would like to learn more about the benefits of propolis. Wonderful. I'm glad that you were intrigued and that was useful for you. OCD can be quite miserable, and I had a person contact me who had a form of OCD called trichotillomania. Boy, that's a mouthful, right? And this individual had obsessive hair chewing. She could not stop chewing on her hair. And it was so bad that she had had 2 different medical procedures to remove, because hair does not digest, by the way. She had to have 2 different procedures to remove accumulations of hair. One that was an accumulation of hair in her stomach, and one which was an accumulation of hair in her esophagus. So this poor lady had really been through it, and she had been on, I think she told me 6 or 7 different prescription anti-anxiety and OCD medications. And sometimes she would get a little bit of help and sometimes none at all. She always got a big old bucket of side effects, and so didn't stay on them for very long. She finally went, as a last resort, to an integrative psychiatrist who was working with her on what kinds of things to do in her life to try to help her. And the first thing he did was put her on a salmon extract that was rich in EPA and DHA, phospholipids, and these peptides. And she said her hope was that when she used that maybe within the first couple of months, if she could get her symptoms reduced in half, she would be deliriously happy. And when she contacted me, she said she'd been using it for 3 weeks, and she had no symptoms of this trichotillomania that had been bothering her since just a little after puberty, and now she was in her late 20s, and she was absolutely delighted. So when we look at individuals who have sometimes what on the outside appears to be bizarre behavior, it's very easy to blame that person. Oh, you're just crazy, or gosh, get a handle on it, or you don't have to act that way. But the truth of the matter is that we are highly susceptible to dysfunction in our brain that manifests itself in changes in behavior, and if we can restore proper balance and functionality and health to the brain, just think of what great impact we can have on helping people. Here's a person who would like to have the slides for this program or would like to watch it again. Thank you very much. That's very kind of you. This will appear on the Terry Talks Nutrition website. Give us a couple of days. It's usually about 2 days to get everything done that needs to upload it. And we have a whole library and archive of different webinars by very prestigious individuals, far more prestigious than I. We have cancer specialists and people with expertise in Alzheimer's disease who have done both interviews and webinar presentations that you can go back to and review and listen at any time. What would you give a 1-year-old to boost the immune system who goes to daycare and is constantly picking up sicknesses? Well, that's really difficult because when you go to daycare, you're really encountering a lot of exposure at a very young age. At 1-year-old, it's probably too late to say breastfeeding, because breastfeeding gives a lot of passive immunity, and if you can provide breast milk for your 1-year-old up until the age of 2, even if you choose not to nurse, but if you continue to provide breast milk, then you will see an increase in passive immunity. Healthy eating, increasing levels of vitamin C, not crazy levels, but bump up the vitamin C a little bit, bump up a little bit of vitamin A, and vitamin D, absolutely. We've overlooked vitamin D for so long, and we think about it for bones and we think about it for cancer prevention, but vitamin D is absolutely crucial for proper immunity. So if you can look at focusing on some of those nutrients that boost immunity. I hate giving 1-year-olds botanicals because their poor little neurological system and your immune system is immature, and the younger you introduce that, the more risk you have for allergic reactions. So I usually like to wait till kids are at least 2.5-ish. When children start to eat a wider variety of foods, that's when I think it's a better time to start thinking about introducing other health agents that can help boost these kids' immunity. Here's another request for a copy of the slides. We will see what we can do to get those to you. All right, any other questions, folks? I will check the chat box to make sure I didn't miss any. All right, I don't think I missed any. All right. Just going to scroll down for a moment. Bear with me. Sorry we had some technical problems with this information, folks. It's kind of disappointing, but I am glad we got all the way to the end before we did have technical difficulties. I don't see any other questions coming in via the chat box or via the Q&A box. So please feel free to contact us if you think of your question. If you're like me, the second you hang up is when you think of what it was that you wanted to ask. Please feel free to contact us. We'd be happy to try to assist you in providing answers wherever we might. We thank you for taking time out of your busy day to learn more about ways that natural interventions can play a really substantial role in helping kids be healthier, be it physically, mentally, or both. So until we meet again, good health to you. Bye-bye.